I am really happy to be here. Up to 2 years ago, I was helping organize Devopsdays Amsterdam, and I really think that every one of the organizers is like a hero because you don't know the amount of effort and love that they put into making this happening. With the barbecue and the events and the keynotes and the amount of meetings that we have to do before to answer emails from sponsors and do all of it. And they all do this voluntarily, so kudos to every one of the organizers. It's an amazing job. Like I said, my name is Thiago. I'm originally from Brazil, but I'm in the Netherlands for 4 years. Ik kan een beetje of Nederlands praten, but I think in English is better. I've always worked in more things related to the data world. For the last 10 years, since I graduated from university and I did all the things on it, I've always been trying to do data things happen in the world. Data science have some problems, all the things have some problems, but I found out that usually the problem is not the technology itself. The problem is more related to actually how do we want to build systems in a nice way. And inside, just want to have my speaker notes here. Just that whenever we are working with a system, usually the biggest problem that we face is not the technology itself. It's the people and the process around it and the culture. And at Linkit, being a head of solutions engineer, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to enable companies to build things in a nicer way, in a better way. And there I get the freedom and I get an amazing team to do it. And all this time, I have faced very different problems. And again, people are the most crucial part. We are here talking about empathy, about culture. Sometimes you see some Kubernetes YAML here and there, but I feel that we talk a lot about culture, empathy, but architecture has been a little bit left out about how to move faster in these last years. So torching architecture ivory towers for me is start with this. A big problem that I see is that sometimes architects become far from the reality, far from the implementation of things and the deployment of things. They are kind of frozen within time. From these last years, we have been talking about DevOps and Lean and Agile and Kata, and this goes back into the shoulder of giants from the 80s, from the Go, from Elijah. So all the things that we have been discussing has been about empathy, overcoming the communication problems, observability, integrating teams, the 3 ways, how to make faster feedback loops. We're now treating everything as a code as much as we can. We are now becoming YAML engineers with all the Ansible and the Terraform. That's what we do in the majority of the time. And we're talking about serverless application and reactive architectures and resilience and blah, blah. But the end goal is try to move faster and build stuff that the client wants to do. And in large enterprise especially, I see very few discussions about how to make architecture move faster. How can we make it better? Well, who here works in what they consider a large corporation, an enterprise corporation? So it's a large number of people. So I don't have to ask, have you ever tried to build something in a large corporation, to a lot of you? Because it takes a lot of time to approve things and to move on. And you have to talk to several layers of architecture committees and domain architects and business architects and data architects and enterprise architects and whatever architects that they have around. They have their own committee meetings, and they have a lot of things to do where they get inputs from SharePoint and from Confluence and from emails and from PPT presentations that are shared or Word documents. And within that little time that they have to read this block with arrows and decide if that is okay to build. Is that okay to operate? Do we have a support chain? Like all these decisions. And sometimes we even have companies now that have to have a permission to design a system. Like there are some companies that are asking like, hey, before you actually do a POC, first you have to design a system and send to the committee so we decide if you can think about it. Like we're starting to get to this absurd world. And I'm not here to say that architects are bad people, far from it. There is a book that I really like called Humble Consulting. And one thing that I learned from it a lot is that almost no one is doing their job that you consider a poor job because they are doing a poor job because they want. They are all there because of the context of the tools and the structure that is provided, and they're all trying their best. It's very, very, very unlikely that if you hate that sysadmin or that architect, or if you have problems with it, that is because that person is exactly pinpointing at you and like, I'm going to screw this person's life. That is not what is happening. So you have to open up and to be like helping them, because when something goes wrong with an audit or something, this architects that we have problems with, they're usually the ones that get called in front of the CIO or the CTO to explain why the decisions were taken. So they have this problem that is, we are a little bit frozen by the hierarchy. We have to ask permission to do stuff. We have to make sure that we have everything sorted out before we actually do something. And this goes completely against of what we have been discussing for DevOps for the last 10 years. Small, empowered teams that are independent, the two pizza kind of stuff. But if you cannot do that with yourself, you have to involve a lot of people, then it's a little bit contradictory. And the architects themselves, sometimes they get frozen by the lack of trust. Because if they allow something to go into production that they didn't vouch, or there is no like proper documentation around it, when something goes wrong, they are the one that get called around. So they need to have that CC on the email saying, I told them to not to do it. Or they need to have that document that is like, they are doing different from the document that it was approved, because they don't trust and they have to micromanage a lot of things that are happening. And this is a trust issue that I see. And this is a lot to do with how people make jokes about marketing back in the days. This is something that I really think that relates to how architecture is being done now, and that's where the title of the talk comes from. Someone that doesn't know the reality of what the consumer wants. And I try to translate this a little bit more to our world. So, usually, if you go into a company and you talk with auditors and things, and you realize how it's drawn, and if you actually go into what is deployed, there is a distinction. What we share with the auditors is not what happens. Let's be true. And this concept of this enterprise architect is something that came usually from the 90s and for the 2000s, where you had one ERP system, one monolith, and you need somebody looking over a lot of stuff. But not now. Now, if you are working, we are deploying thousands of applications. You have 1,000 microservices. Now you're deploying functions with its own deployment pipeline, depending on the case. How can a team of 8, 10 people keep track of it? It doesn't make sense. They have a lot more meeting, a lot less time. They have to blame things, and they start to like document everything. And they become the bottleneck because they start putting one thing that is on the Agile manifest. Software over document, the architects turn this way around. Document over software, because of the blaming culture that we have around. So they need to do this because they need to have this document to show and to blame when things go wrong. So instead of fixing the problem, they try to fix the document. Their goal, transitioning from make the end customer happy and to generate more money to the company, that is the overall goal, to not being blamed by the mistakes, by creating blueprints and trying to make sure that people do not go around the borders of the blueprints of the system that were designed. When this becomes their goal, then we go back into the DevOps fight that we had with the downwards spiral that we had the operations team, that the goal was keeping things stable and paid if something didn't go down, to the other one paid by the features. These things are completely contradictory, and now we have the same thing with the architects. So this is not sustainable in the long term, because since they start having less time to do things, they have less time to code, and then they start to get more and more far from reality. Amazing engineers sometimes become architects, and after a few months, a few years, they get disconnected. Because the concept of enterprise architect, it was someone that is an Oracle enterprise architect. Oracle didn't change in the 90s from one year to the other that much. Nowadays, if you stay 1 year outside of the Kubernetes environment, Jesus, you are lost. Like, things change so fast nowadays. You cannot give this a way of being enclosed with the trench. So what I'm saying is that everybody should forget about architects and move as a startup, right? Not that much. Enterprises are not startups. Enterprise is not a curse word. Like, a lot of people see it as a bad thing, but let's not go into there. Things sometimes in enterprise move slower, but again, not because people want to. It's because they have a lot of things to take into account. Audit, security, regulations, procurement, change management, legacy systems, and let me tell you, your new fancy Kubernetes is going to be a legacy system in the future, so let's not think that you are unique here. Of course, there are reflections of the culture that are shared there. Like usually larger enterprise with a lot of this handoffs and these things are more, they have a little bit more of inertia to move the way that they're doing. They have more blamer and finger pointing, a lot more politics depending on the case, and they have some outdated paradigms. Some people are still considering let's do this with sprints too, or whatever, but yeah, some enterprises pay a lot of money to sort it out new ways of working. They copy from Spotify, they hire innovation manage, they implement Scrum, they certify everyone in SAFe. Oh, SAFe gives me chills. It's and they start declaring DevOpsy. Like, we are DevOps, we have DevOps teams because we have DevOps. And let's not go into the hot takes, but. So I wanted to try something. Let's try to imagine how an OS upgrade would happen in a startup and compare it to a real enterprise. In a startup, and I will make a very high voice for the person asking for it, so just you know the different dialogues. I'm a terrible person with voices. So on a startup, it would be something like this. Shall we do this now? And then the person would be like, yeah, I have time. Oh, there was a problem with the update, and now one of our microservices is not working. Okay, fix it. It might take up to an hour. Okay, I think it's done now. Can you test it? Sure, looks good. Great, done. Interaction is over. You fix the problem. The guy tapped on your shoulder. There was some downtime. You have some clients. People were sad, blah, blah, blah. That's good. Now imagine if you try to do the same thing in a bank. Hey, can you do this OS upgrade? Yep, I have time now. Let's just keep all the process and act like a startup, okay? Sure. That's my dream come true. But I think there's a problem, and some of the payments API are not working. I will roll back. Done. It was less than 5 minutes down, so I'll check the logs and see what happened. The regulator called because they saw some people on Twitter complaining about something down. They want to know what happened, so write a thoroughly email about this. Okay, I'll write something. Okay, they read your email, and now they want some evidence of what decided who and when, and you need to write a timeline. Copy me on the CC. Okay. Spend some time, writes that. Oh, also, we have an important ISO audit in 2 months, so let's put all projects on hold and all hands on deck, because this is the most important thing now. But you promised us that we would be able to take our debt, our technical debt now. Like, now I have to do this? Well, if you don't do this, we're probably gonna extinguish our unit and we'll be out of job, so it's your decision. Okay, then the guy does the audit, does the everything, and then he found out that the audit, there was 73 problems to solve. They would have to write, detail everything about the 73 things, come back to them ASAP, and then the manager or the PO or whatever comes back and say, hey, the CTO was annoyed about this downtime and this problem with the auditors. They keep nagging me on this, and so I'll keep nagging you on this because my boss is nagging me on this, and everybody's nagging someone until it reaches to someone. And this is a very big problem that you start to have. Like, it's not the same structure and the same relations. So when we talk about moving faster, we cannot compare startups with regulated enterprises. So what can we do about architecture? Like, please do not say safe again. That's not how you solve things. But first, it's important to realize that architectures, in a lot of times, is a subjective matter, just like real building architecture. This is the Cone Cathedral. The Cone Cathedral is one of the most amazing Gothic buildings ever done. It took more than 350 years to be done. It has a lot of details, and it's kind of like an organic thing. This is the Ville Savoie, close to Paris, from Le Corbusier. One person did one project, clear. Some people like this as a place to live. Some people would not like to live in Cohen's Gothic Cathedral. I would love to, but don't think I could pay the rent. I think it's close to Amsterdam, but the Ville Savoie is like something really nice. And you also have, for example, the Glyphothek in Munich that is inspired by classical architectures. And here, I'm pretty sure that different people have different preference about this. And let me tell you, software architecture is not different. People have preference over language and things and how to do stuff because of how they want to do their things. Some people prefer Java because Java gives less freedom to them and it's easier to do things, while some people would rather do things with Python or with Go. Some people would rather use Kafka because they're more used to Kafka, while some people would rather keep going with the enterprise bus that they have been using. Personal, subjective things are there all the time in the decision process of deciding what architecture we're going to follow. So, and this was clearly in this amazing book in the end of the 90s called The Cathedral and the Bazaar from Eric Raymond. It's a book showing how the Linux open source was made, how it's more similar to a bazaar, like putting things all together and creating new stands and people working together, every eye is looking at the bugs at the same time, in contrast of building a cathedral where you have this very few chief architects, this enlightened people that decide how it's going to look. And then someone just has to follow all the steps necessary to make that happen. So, okay, so it's not like a startup, and you were telling me, so what should we do? This is usually what I see in a lot of companies. A group of enlightened enterprise architecture, replaced and then down by domain and business architects, and then some solutions architects, and the grunts, us, the engineering team, down, just getting instructions. And these enterprise architects are the ones sometimes with the biggest salaries, the subscriptions to Gartners and to Forrester, watching for the new trends in the marketing and changing an application entirely by wiping an arrow and replacing by another arrow, and like, whoa, now we have Kafka because we have that written in an arrow. Like, that's not how it works. Like, and this was created in the process within time to avoid the problems that we saw in the OS upgrade that I mentioned. Like, you have to add new layers, new handoffs, together with ITIL to protect the change management process, to make sure that nothing wrong happens in production. And again, will we ever release a software to production that there is no problem? Never. There will always be problems, always. And that's the mindset that if you are an architect or whatever and you're deploying something to production, yeah, you have to minimize the risk, of course, but there will be problems. And if it doesn't have problems, it's because there was a problem, somebody was scared to tell you, he fixed it before you knew. That's what happens. This blaming and scary things. Because there are companies like this with 3 layers of architectures, with just 1 or just 2 or 4 or whatever. And what we learned from the DevOps movement, from the goal from Elijah, from the theory of constraints, from the 3 ways, make work visible, work in empower the small teams, reduce waste, minimize your handoffs, use CI/CD, and have fast, empowered teams. This contrasts directly with that goal, with that idea. So this view does not reflect something that can work like that. These high-pay people looking from above to below to see how things are doing. Like, this is not how you can keep your speed going, the awareness, the context provided by the people that are actually implementing the things. You lose a lot of the context. But moving as a startup as well, we discuss, is not valid for everyone. So I tried something that I like it to call the stream of architects. The name sucks. I'm terrible with names. You can change it. What I decided to do and tested is no more full-time architects. All the architects on this architecture stream are also members from your teams. And this architecture stream is composed of 5 members. It can be more, depending on the size of the company, can be less. And they all have juniors, mediors, and seniors, and you have to have different levels of people there. Because juniors usually ask the best questions about architecture. Because they go to you and say like, why are you using Kafka now? Oh, because we need to send this message, but can we just, like, we're going to build an entire cluster just for this application? Like, it doesn't make that much sense. Oh, but we may scale in the future or whatever. Like, okay, so you're thinking about the future, but shouldn't you think about just what you require now and what you do in the future? Like, of course, I have to build future-proof stuff, but sometimes it's good to have this person, like, put you on the ground there. And the diversity quota, it's a little bit problematic here, because sometimes companies don't even have diverse people to actually put in a diversity quota. And by a diversity quota, I mean, if you have 5 members in your stream of architects, please do not have 5 white males. Please. The other thing that I usually do is that this architecture stream, they have a mandate. They stay there for 5 weeks in this architecture stream. Every week, someone enters and someone leaves. And I do this to make sure that there is new, fresh idea come, and the position of the architects comes back to what is actually happening. And they work on 1 time per week. So they go to a room once per week. They have their architecture stream day. So while they are in the architecture stream, they are not 100% available for the development teams that they have. And this is very cut-inspired to the sense that they have 20% of their time to focus on the architecture part and to discuss with other people. But their main goals are several. First, they need to create standards. Standards are not an exhaustive list of things that people can do. Standards are just like advices. Hey, this is how the majority of our teams are deploying Java applications into production. Everything is already set. You can use this way of doing. You can do this. If you want to move your own way, that's your own problem. And this is very similar to the SRE thing. Like, they provide the tools, they give you a way, they have SLOs, but if you want to do your own way, of course, sometimes you can do it. And also, you have the tech with the business alignment and the mentality. Because on the grunt work, we as a development team sometimes don't focus that much on the business. But if you have to occasionally go into the architecture level, you need to think about other lines of business. And this forces a lot of change to have a business mindset while developing new technology. And also, it's really important that this involves a lot of sharing. Why? Because you don't have more than one architect that is there for 10 years and know everything. Everybody's rotating. Everybody's writing documentation. Everybody's sharing, bringing back to the field and going back. And this has a lot to do with one of the main goals is to document things. When somebody joins the architecture stream, he can go into all the documents and see how deployments are done, how monitoring are done, how things happen. And this has a lot to do with the other contracts. Who here thinks Google is a very free place to work, like that you can do anything you want there? Not a lot of people could. Because in Google, you have a specific Java version that you can deploy to production. So we have containers, we have a lot of things, you have all the freedom, you can use any language you want. Yeah, not really. Have a specific Java version, a specific image, a specific version of Go. And when something changes in Google, it changes for the entire teams. They have a mono repo for their production thing, and everything changes on that mono repo. So giving freedom to people like we think and we see on talks is not necessarily what happens on the real enterprises. So, okay, so Thiago, you're telling me that I have to fire all my architects and do this. No. I'm saying that you, of course, need a transition phase. How to implement that, you need to plan it. And like the architects that you have, they are amazing people. They have like a lot of experience, system technology, a lot of context, business ideas, and so much to add. You may think about why you implemented this 5 years ago. You may think it was a stupid decision, but it was not. It was very, very well thought and reasoned to that context and that specific knowledge. Everything seems very easy on hindsight, and they gather all this knowledge. What you have to do is make them work together towards this architecture stream, start documenting better things, but it's smart. Not document how things are in their mind, but how things are on the real world. How the things that they design are actually implemented. How do we monitor things? How do we deploy applications? How do we connect to our databases? Wait, do we do authentication and authorization with AD and a single sign-on? Oh, we have 3 ADs? Oh, we have LDAP yet? We have a Kerberos separated because we have an old Hadoop cluster? How your change management happen? All these things need to be taken into account. Like, make them work together to have this initial phase of the architecture stream working. And just like we have been seeing and what Charit mentioned yesterday on the keynote, we have no clue about the new problems that are arising when we're building new ways of system. Like, no idea at all. So I think we have to build this team of rotating engineers with different backgrounds, ideas, perspectives, and technologies, reaching this common ground and enabling development teams. Like, change the perspective of architecture as a gatekeeper to an enabler and helper. Like a bunch of people that are that are close to the work that is actually being done, that are not out of touch with the actual grunt work. Also with the add-on that if you do something like this, you will institutionalize the knowledge with the rotation. You avoid power accumulation and systems ideas that are just because this person is the best architect because he's actually the best speaker or the best PPT presentation maker. Like, this is not how we should be doing this. And as a last remark, I'm not selling this. This is not a way to do everything, and I don't know how this will work out. This is not a magical wand. Like, what I know is that applying blindly some methodologies that you read is not going to work in the company that you are using. You don't apply SAFe because SAFe is the way to go. You don't apply Scrum because Scrum is the way to go. You have to pick up the best ideas that are happening inside your company and adjust to how personal relations happen and what business product you are doing. Like, should you always deploy something when there is a new commit, when something is merged? Depend on your business case. Like, sometimes it makes sense. What is important is to always have a deployable artifact. That's I will not discuss. But I'm sharing my experience and ideas, and sometimes it can sound a bit radical, but I just want to force change. And it's not the only way. You may have other experience or other problems, but if you're looking the way that you are architecting and building IT solutions and something like, just have a coffee, a beer. And my last take before I go is for you to look around a bit and realize that we are in Devopsdays Amsterdam in one of the oldest DevOps days, if not the oldest now, that happened besides the original one in Ghent. But how many women, non-cis, black, Muslims do you see around you? And realize that you may think that this is not your problem, you have no bias, you have no prejudice, but well, a lot of these underrepresented groups, they are leaving this field because they don't feel welcome and they don't feel nice here. So sometimes the bias is a no, you don't know that you're doing something that you're doing. And the majority of the time, you have a lot of unknown bias. I do, everyone has. So just force yourself a bit to spot this and to stop the microaggressions that happen in the day-to-day life. Be more an ally and also hire juniors, train them, and expect something good from them. And with that, I would say thank you, and if you're in doubt, just reach out.
Thank you, Thiago.
Yeah, questions. Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
One person.
Yes.
Can I throw?
Yes, yes, please do. Please do.
Sorry. Can you move? Oh, thanks. Thanks.
I think we get points for like throwing things at people.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I really like the idea about the stream architect thing. But if I would like to implement it in my company or in my fleet, for instance, where we've got 50 developers, then how can I convince my manager? I think there's a time it's time consuming to get someone to know his new role in the architecture, and moreover, becoming an architect is some kind of a promotion. Feels like a promotion for a lot of people. So if you take that away from a developer, how can you get him there to appreciate his role and his future in it?
Yeah, so about the promotion thing, I think we have this ladder in the IT that I think is changing a lot. that we have junior, medium, senior, lead, and then you have to become an architect or a manager. That's the only way to get more money at some point. And I am glad that this is changing in some companies, especially. And in the US, we now see a lot of principals or fellows. And these are people that are usually have really, really, really high salary, and they're just brought into the room when there is a problem that nobody else can solve. So these are like the most amazing people. So you have to change that perspective as a coacher inside the company. That is like being an architect is just a part of your job. Your job is designing, architecting, development, testing, productionalize, and operating something. It's not a different idea that you have to do just separate steps of this. Your job is only done when things are running in production, and you are monitoring and observing that. That is a part of it, and designing is a part of it. But how to implement that? Yeah, you have to convince your manager, and yeah, I can say that I can help, but then I would be selling this, so I'm not going to say that. But you have to be able to, because I'm not like a Matt that takes money for everything. So, so
just two arguments. Two reasons.
Okay.
I can focus on to get my manager to.
Okay, I think the first main reason that you get is that you are able to move faster if you do this, and the second reason is you get all hands on deck, in the sense that you don't have more that animosity between those people in the tower and we in the development team, because those people in the tower are actually you or someone from your team that is there 4 days a week at least, working in something. Because they don't go into this stream and stay there for 5 weeks. They just go there 1 day a week. So this fact that you have these people that are your fellows instead of your supervisors or stuff, I think it really, really brings the culture better. But depends on if your company wants to do this.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but we can take one more question. Does anybody want to ask a question?
There.
Oh, can you please can you please pass it along?
Oh, he's gonna try. Whoa.
Okay, so I'm not the worst at throwing.
Yeah. I'm struggling a bit with the idea of stream architects because, well, first of all, not all the people can at the same time go deep into the development and keep overview, like horizontal overview of the system. And that's typically provided by experienced people in the company who actually reflect a broader landscape of the software, right? So that's actually one thing. Another thing regarding this ivory tower architect, they deliver some certain knowledge about regulations, which is very, very, very specific. So regulations on security, on legal issues, require so much special knowledge that if I will start investing in it, I will stop being a developer. And to be honest, I'm not really totally interested in this. So I really don't understand why do we need architects, but we definitely need some, how to say it, serving leadership in the teams that actually deliver this special knowledge to the teams, and they wouldn't even start developing and forming the team if these specialists are not like parts of the teams really. Yeah, for the part that you don't have people enough that can see the horizontal while developing things, yeah, that is, I don't think that is completely true for everyone and everything. I think maybe that's your opinion or someone else, but you can start hiring focus on this. People that actually want to be developers from designing into operations and understand all the business ideas. I know it's hard to find, but you can start to focus and enable them to actually do this. And the part about the regulations, I completely agree. But at the same time, I don't think that someone that was a good developer and becomes an architect is the best person to look into finance regulations. So I think that you need a team from legal and things that will help and do things and do all these reports and help you on it. But I don't think it's up to these architects to be able to do this. And this is the part that I want to take out from them and let them focus on the business and the systems and let them have candid talks with the legal team, but not by just one person, because like now we have that accumulated knowledge of people that have done this for 20 years and they cannot leave that position. But what I'm telling is that if you start transitioning,
you would have that knowledge scattered around into the company and on this group of people and on the documents that everybody are able to go a little bit deeper and understand it. But like I said, there is a transition phase that can take years now if you are in a company like a bank that have been doing this for 30 years. There is so much knowledge in the mind of some of the architects about regulation that you cannot just say like, hey, now you have to go and develop some Go. That's not going to work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Thiago.
Thank you,
Unfortunately, we're out of time and we cannot take any more questions. Thank you so much.